We're looking at one of the most criminally underutilized aspects of striking for mixed martial arts, feints, with the best feinter in mixed martial arts, Israel Adesanya. You know, when it comes to using feints in striking, this guy is like leagues ahead of everybody. Now, your striking game could jump leagues if you understand and implicate what he's doing here. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to give you knowledge about feints so that you too can use the power of feints. Now, there's a lot to take in here, so we're going to use a color code to help you learn more effectively. Anything that you see in red is going to be a feint from Israel. Red. Anything that you see in green is the real attack, usually following something that is red. And then anything that you see in yellow is going to be the opponent's reaction to a feint. So remember that as we move forward. What is a feint? Let's all get on the same page with this. Quite simply, a feint is a technique that tricks your opponent into making the wrong move. For example, the question mark kick. The question mark kick starts by looking like it's going to be a kick to the gut. This tricks the opponent into making the wrong move and blocking low as the kick goes high. Feints often look like the beginning of real techniques. For instance, here is a real push kick intended to hit the target. Notice how at the midpoint of the kick, the knee is up and bent. It has a certain look to it at a certain point. You'll also notice that at this point, Anderson is going to begin blocking to the body. Now notice that at the beginning of this question mark here, he uses a feint that looks like a push kick before he turns it into something else. That's the key with a feint. You trick him into thinking it's one move, then switch it to another. Now ideally, you're gonna trick the person and then hit them with big shots right after. But feints have a lot more use than that. They can be used to create a lot of confusion and back the person up. Very confusing. They can be used to make reads and see how the opponent reacts to certain things. Watch. Israel feints outside right here, and he notices Anderson leans to his left. When he does that, he lines up a new shot. Finally, feints just make your game much more layered. There's much more going on when you don't know which one's the real strike and which one is the feint strike. Let's talk about the role of fear when it comes to feints. Quite simply, when your opponent is afraid of your feints and your striking, they back up. This gives you the room to do more feints. Israel, it's a pretty unique advantage that everyone really fears his striking. So these people back up to literally any flinch he does. But to make feints work, you have to instill some sense of fear. We'll talk more about how to do that later in the video. One of the most important things with feinting is having mastery of distance management, footwork, and headwork. These fundamental defensive skills are going to give you an innate understanding of the distance you need to be away in order to throw a feint safely. It's easy to move too close and feint and get knocked out for it. But when you understand the distance properly, your feints are much more effective. Okay, now that we've covered all that pre-knowledge, let's get into the specifics. These are the actual individual techniques Israel uses. We're going to go through and name them all, because naming things is very important. Naming something is the beginning to understanding it. We're going to begin with the fake jab and look at how Israel uses this in two different ways. The first way is that Israel just uses the hand. So if you watch the hand there, he uses that to feint, then he sets up whatever he was going to throw. Very commonly, it's a high kick or some kind of rear kick after the fake jab. The second way is by faking with the hand and the front foot, and only the front foot. So watch this. Adesanya uses the front hand and front leg together to make it look like he's going to step into a jab. He does this repeatedly till he sees what he wants, and then he goes in. The advantage of this one is that he can step in, see what he sees, decide if he wants to attack, and then if not, quickly move back to safety. Now we're going to talk about a really useful one. This is the fake cross. And you can take a look at it here. It's just like a cross that goes halfway out, then comes back. It can be very useful because crosses are very scary punches, so you tend to draw out reactions by faking it. It can draw out big reactions too, which open up all kinds of cool things. So I'm calling this one an outside step. And what's unique about this one is that it really looks like two different moves that people tend to have big reactions to. Let's take a look. Israel steps and leans over to his right, which draws out the reaction from Anderson of leaning to the left. So now the question is, what two moves does this fake lean and step look like? Well, the first is also a cross. If you watch someone throw a cross, the first thing you'll see is that lead foot is going to step forward and then slightly outside. The second thing you'll notice is a slight lean towards the foot that has stepped. A low kick will also have this step and lean, so depending on what they're reacting to from this feint, you could throw a couple different ways. Watch. Izzy throws that outside step feint like we've been talking about, and he notices Anderson leans to the left. That's because he thinks it's a cross, he's trying to slip. So when Izzy outside steps again, that's when he catches Anderson trying to slip across. I really like this one a lot. This is the grounded rear teep or grounded rear push kick. Check it out here. It's a slight forward flinch of the leg that makes your opponent think a push kick is coming. And what this move is supposed to look like is the very beginnings of that kick. So watch the leg, that little slight nudge of it in the very beginning is what we're trying to replicate with this feint. Now there's two versions of the teep feint. This is the grounded one because the foot never actually leaves the ground when he throws the feint. It's a move that's pretty unique to Izzy. I don't really see a lot of people throw it in MMA. Second version of the fake teep, the lifted rear teep. This is another version of that pushing kick, only this time what we're going to do is lift the leg completely up off the ground. So watch this. Lifts the leg, Anderson reacts, then he throws a punch behind it. Now what's important to know is there's two ways to finish the rear teep. The first is to put the leg back so you end in the same stance that you started in. Now that finish you can see here and then here. The second version is that he starts in one stance, throws the lifted teep, then puts it down, so at the end of the move he has switched stances. And that version of the move you can see here and then here as well. We've covered the rear teep, now let's focus on the lead teep, and there's going to be three versions of this. The first one is with the grounded leg. The second one is with a lifted leg, however, Israel is going to stay stationary, meaning he's not moving forward. The final one is going to be a lifted leg and a slide forward. Got to be careful with this one, though. It can have dire consequences. We had a grounded rear teep. We also have a grounded rear roundhouse kick. This is a slight turn of the hips that's designed to look like the beginning of a roundhouse kick. Once again, the leg is planted the entire time. Now you may be asking yourself, what's the difference between the rear grounded teep and the rear grounded roundhouse kick? Very simply, the grounded rear roundhouse kick looks circular. It's more generated by turning the hips, whereas the grounded push kick looks more straight and it's more generated by bending the knee. Another version of a fake roundhouse kick is what I call a slide roundhouse kick. And this is a version of the kick where you're once again going to end up switching stances at the end of it, and it is intended to look like a roundhouse kick. I've also seen two versions of this move. There's one that stays low to the ground, like you're seeing here. Then there's one that comes higher up, so it looks even more like a roundhouse kick. Here's a really interesting one. This is the rear leg slide, and he doesn't use this one much, but here's what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to look like the beginning of that kick right there, a sliding roundhouse kick. The only UFC fight I really saw him use this one in was the fight against Anderson Silva. He doesn't happen too often. It's definitely a great one for making your opponent move back without moving in too far yourself. And by faking it enough times, your opponent's going to be confused to when it's actually coming in and not be ready for it when you actually go. You know, I've only seen him try this once, but here's a fake takedown, and I really like this for Izzy because it's almost like this what the fuck moment. He's trying to shoot, and it would be great to see him work that in more in the future. We're now going to talk about something I call the 12 principles. This is something I made up for this video, and these are the underlying concepts that make feints work. Things like going straight then curve, things like going low then high. These are the underlying fabric of what make these techniques work. You're going to notice there's a lot of overlap. Here you see lead and rear, but we could also think of this as quick and close versus powerful and far. The more of these concepts you combine onto a feint, the more effective it's going to be. First one I'm going to discuss is ABF, or always be faking. The thing to know about Israel Adesanya and how you should do your feints is you should be using many feints all the time. I feel like when people feint, they only feint like once in a while. But check this out. At the beginning of the fight, let's count how many times Israel is going to feint before he actually throws an opening attack. 9, and one more. Now he goes for the attack. So I can't emphasize this enough, guys. Don't be afraid to use a lot of feints. The level change feint. I feel like a lot of people know this one, and the basic idea is the feint and the attack are at different heights. You want to get them thinking low or high, and then do the opposite with the attack. This makes it hard to transition between forms of defense. So this next one we've got here, we call this one the last thing that hit. This one is very important, and here's how it works. Israel's going to hit him with a low kick. This creates a recency bias for the low kick. Anything that looks like a low kick, he's going to react to. But actually, you use that as a way to trick him into thinking that technique that just hit him is the one that's coming next, when in actuality, something completely different is coming. A path change, very important. This is the idea that you get them thinking in one direction, like straight, then switch to something different, like curved. Here you can see he goes straight, curved, back to straight. This idea of switching the direction things are coming from can be very confusing for your opponent, as the defenses for straight versus curved can be very different. A limb change means switching between two different types of strikes. So for instance, a punch to a kick or a kick to a punch, as you're about to see here. He sees leg, then he goes hand. Switching between these different types of strikes can be very confusing because blocking a kick is very different than blocking a punch. Blocking a punch is very different than blocking an elbow, and etc., etc. Switch up the limb that you attack with. A same limb path change is when the limb that is doing the feinting is also the one that does the path change. So the question mark kick is a big example of this. The same limb starts looking one way and then it switches to an entirely different direction. It seemed harmless is the idea that you do a move so many times without doing anything after that it begins to look like you're not going to do anything with it at all. When you sense that your opponent thinks that this movement is harmless, that's when you go in for the real attack, preceded by this move that you thought was harmless. The repeat is when you throw a feint to a technique, then immediately throw the same move that you feinted right after. What you're trying to do is mess up the timing for the defense of the opponent. You just need to draw out their defense and throw off the timing of their defense for a split second. When you do this, you create a momentary opening because they lag for a second. It's pretty interesting. One extremely useful thing about feints is they can stop aggressive opponents. Just the act of feinting sometimes is enough to make the opponent move backwards. And this can be extremely useful when you're up against the cage and you need to make an exit, but you don't want to make a giant big movement. Just a little feint can get them off you. The lead to rear. This is the idea that the lead limb, in this case the hand, is used to set up the rear leg, which in this case is the leg. Now, what this does is it uses something close and quick to mess up the guy's timing so that he can't really defend something far and powerful. You have very contradictory flight paths, if you will. The timing and techniques to defend them are very different, and having to switch between them can leave an opening. We have the opposite, which is the rear to lead. This is when the back limb sets up the front limb. This one, the timing is reversed, so instead of close and quick, we have far and powerful to start, then close and quick. Far and powerful is very interesting, in fact, because it can draw out big reactions, leaving them open for a quick little zap after they react to it. This works especially well with kicks, using the rear kick to feint and set up the lead kick. We also have a rear to rear, which is where something far and powerful sets up something far and powerful. When you get scared of something that's a big shot, like a cross, you can have big reactions that do not leave you mentally ready to dodge another big rear powerful attack. We have the mid combo feint, which I think is the toughest of any of these. This is where you feint mid combination and then attack. Extremely difficult to pull off and not get hit while trying to do it.